Hey everyone, this is Nidhi from Designhill, your host for today. I hope you and your family are keeping well and safe, taking all the precautions and taking care of your near and dear ones. Welcome yet again to another event by Designhill, and today we will be discussing how to measure return on income and attribution of business marketing spend. This event is brought to you by Designhill, was leading creative marketplace that caters to the creative needs of businesses and individuals alike who can source high quality designs from professional designers. Through its print on demand marketplace called Print Shop by Designhill, you can also buy 50 plus unique products with thousands of artworks created by a world class community of independent artists. So, moving ahead, let me introduce our panel of experts for today. We have with us Dina Goldisich. Dina is the CEO of Well Planned Web, an agency that strategically plans, develops, and distributes content for trailblazers B2Bs with complex sales cycles. Whether it's an advanced ABM partnership or intensive lead gen engagement, Well Planned Web knows how to lock eyes with clients' customers. The team has mastered the art and science of human engagement for over 10 years, and the client list includes enterprise organizations in financial services, professional services, healthcare, and B2B e-commerce. Also, SaaS models. The agency has been featured in many worldwide publications and was the finalist for the Content Marketing Institute's Content Marketing Agency of the Year. Dina, you want to say a quick hi to the audience? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
That's better. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Good to be here.
Happy to have you too. Up next, we have Ginger Shim. She is the Senior Marketing Director with SAP. Ginger understands the power of a great story and believes it's at the heart of great marketing. Actively listening to a customer story and then relating how that customer can run better is why she has been proud to work for SAP since 2004. Developing content, engaging channels, and deploying tactics, she educates, stimulates interest, and drives demand alongside the most traditional marketers in the industry. During off hours, she puts her 30 years of experience to use serving on charity board. Ginger.
Hello, everybody.
All right. So up next we have Kenneth Kenny. For people who have uh, attended our event, must know that he has already done a few events and we have already collaborated in past. Kenneth is VP Marketing and podcast host for AI Media Group and A Shark's Perspective. Kenneth is a keynote speaker, accomplished marketer, lead generation driver, and business growth consultant. He's passionate about leveraging data in omni-channel strategies and known for driving growth in digital marketing and advanced and addressable TV. He's led national campaigns working with brands including Axicom, Citi, Chase, Target, GM, American Express, and the list goes on. And over 50 colleges and universities. He has also been an on-air host and producer of TV and radio programs. He's the VP of Marketing and Digital Strategy at AI Media Group, as we told you. Kenneth, please say hi.
Hello, everybody, and it's great to see all the international guests as well. So, bon dia, bonjour, buenos dias, and everything else. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. Last but not the least, we have Michael Brenner. Again, we have collaborated before with Michael as well at Designhill. He is the CEO of Marketing Insider Group. Michael is a CMO, influencer, motivational speaker, and CEO of Marketing Insider Group, where he has worked with 100 plus brands in building effective thought leadership, content marketing, and employee activation programs. After 25 years in sales, marketing, and leadership roles with brands like SAP, Nielsen, and a number of high growth startups, today Michael enjoys sharing his experiences, and client stories to inspire leaders into action that creates impact. He's also the best-selling author of 3 books, including his latest, Mean People Suck, The Content Formula, and Digital Marketing Growth Hacks. Michael.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here again. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking our time from your schedule and joining us today for this panel discussion. It's an honor to have you here with us. Great. So before we start the session, we have a couple of announcements to make. We are giving away certificates to the attendees who would stick till the end of the session. You just can't miss on this chance, guys. So stay tuned till the end. Also, you can take the screenshot of this event and post it on your Twitter handle using hashtag Designhill events and tagging Designhill DH. And all our speakers handle Twitter handles as well, which will be there in the chat section by my colleague Harshita, who is also moderating today's event. One lucky winner will have a chance to win a print shop gift card worth $50. Also, we will be sharing an exclusive coupon code with everyone at the end of the session, using which you can avail 15% off on Designhill contest service to build your brand. So stay tuned. Before we start the session, let's quickly look at what Designhill is all about.
Looking to get your boss to remember your name? Head to the world's #1 creative marketplace, Designhill.
When my company promoted me to head up our latest real estate development project, I was excited, then anxious, then petrified. How was I going to hire the team, get the designs completed, and design beautiful presentation materials on our lean budget while impressing my bosses, some of whom are still learning my name?
Good job, Mitch.
My name's Lawrence. That's why I went to Designhill and got the design help I needed that fit within my company's brand guidelines. The process was simple. Designhill's design contest ensured I'd get a ton of results I'd love. Start by picking a number of designs that inspire you. This one's good, and that one. This one speaks to me. Then share some information about the project. Lastly, pick a package that fits your budget. Do you just want a logo, or do you want it all? Then, boom. I got more than 60 custom design options to choose from, as well as all the other graphic design assets I wanted. And it's all backed by Designhill's 100% money-back guarantee. If I don't find a design I like, I get my money back. You can't lose. Now I have what I need to make a splash at my meetings, with everything from business cards, pamphlets, posters, and more. It's real.
Let the world know it's real and build your brand with Designhill.
All right, guys, that was all about Designhill, and we are set to start the session. We will also be taking up questions during the session. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the question section on your screen. So let's get started. So they say that in marketing industry, if you can't measure it, you better not do it. One of the most important components of a marketing campaign is to constantly keep tracking its performance, its impact, conversions, revenue, and profits. The insights that we gain through this process can be used to drive future data-driven strategy for smarter decision making. So we're going to explore the concept of return on investment in marketing, and I'm going to start with Kenneth with my first question. So Kenneth, when someone asks you, is your marketing really working? What do you think they're really asking? Are they asking if it's generating awareness, generating enough traffic, with good click-through rate, or generating sales? What parts or factors of marketing contributes the most to the ROI?
So I think that can be answered depending on when you also ask that. I want to add that as sort of a caveat. One, it depends on who's asking. And it also depends on when they're asking. If you think of the world that we're going through now, everybody needs growth. We've had a luxury over the last few years where we've spent a lot of time creating, and it's always needed, but to create more emotion or things like that, better ways to connect with customers, better ways to generally drive growth. But now you're getting a lot more questions from the CFO, who's analyzing a lot more of how that actually performs. So, it really depends on trying to break down what the silo is, because unfortunately, so many teams are still so siloed in their efforts that they're not always working towards measuring the same kind of goals. So I think really aligning on that kind of strategy and helping whoever it is in your organization, whether it's a C-level person or if it's a manager or somebody on the customer service team, really establishing some common guidelines to understand what's working and what's not will help move a lot of things forward.
Great. So Ginger, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I totally agree with what Kenneth said. In complete agreement, it really does depend on who you ask. And each executive also has their own agenda, so to speak, right? So the silos are real, and it's not necessarily that you'll be able to break them down, although that's always a goal. It'd be fantastic if we could. The reality is they exist, so you need to work within them and understand what they are. The other thing is it depends a lot on the maturity of the ROI measurement within that company. So every company's different. A lot start with anecdotal evidence and anecdotal measurement. Some move to more superficial measurement where it's about vanity and pleasing leadership and competition and so forth. Then you've got the formulaic group, which is the majority of companies. And those are either evolved metrics where they're looking at conversion rates and they're looking at MQLs and content half-life, or integrated where they're aligned with other departments. And then the other two are they affecting the top line of the company and the bottom line? So the lifetime value of the customer or cost per lead, customer acquisition cost. So it just depends hugely on how mature the company is in their ROI metrics in the past and where they want to go.
Right. So which actually brings me to another question, which is, so a majority of business community that we have at Designhill, they are early age startups. Like you said, it depends company to company. When do you think an early age startup or people who have just, they have started their entrepreneurial journey should start measuring? I mean, when is a good time? And I would ask this to Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts right from the very beginning. One of my favorite quotes that I love to use when I'm speaking is, behind every bad idea is an executive who asked for it. And so, especially when you talk about ROI, it's usually, it's the boss, that is asking that question. And he or she may be the same person that asked us to, do something that doesn't deliver return on investment. I won't pick on any specific tactics. But we're all familiar with those. And so I think we need to, especially when we're in a smaller company or a startup, or if you are the boss, we have to take responsibility and accountability for the things that we do. And it's even more important when you're a startup. So the time to start asking the question, what's the ROI, is, from day one. When I started my own business, I remember I had a 3-year plan, and it was survive, drive, and thrive. And I wanted to just survive the first year. So, making sure I could pay the bills was job number one. And making customers happy was the way to do that. And so, one of the things that I mentioned in the book, Mean People Suck, is I wish that all companies had sort of a customer-centric culture that asked what's in it for the customer with everything that we did. Because when you do that, everything becomes about adding value to customers who help us pay the bills and deliver that profitability. So I think it all comes full circle, right? We have to push back against the mean executives who are asking us to do stuff that doesn't deliver ROI. We have to make sure we're measuring return on investment. And I think the maybe counterintuitive way to get there is by asking what's in it for the customer.
Great. So that customer centricity is important right from day one. Right. Ginger, we would like to have your views on that. Can you please unmute yourself?
So I won't do that again. Thank you. Obviously I'm going to agree with what Michael just said, because it makes perfect sense. But I think to add on to that, what really matters is to have an integrated strategy. So return on investment is going to look different at the top of the funnel than it will at the bottom of the funnel. And also with your integrated strategy, you have to pay attention to what your KPIs are, right? So if your KPI is about leadership and awareness, that's going to look very different from demand generation or loyalty, right? And are you marketing to a net new audience, or are you marketing to an installed base? And when you build your strategy, you have to get buy-in from all of your stakeholders at every stage of the funnel. And it's kind of funny, I've talked to different people about how their mind works, if you will. So when I talk to some people, they think in words, right? Not surprisingly, a lot of marketers do that. Or maybe they think in pictures, right? I happen to think in Visio flowcharts. So for me, I'm always looking at, what the map looks like in my head. I don't know why, but it's how, and when I discovered that not everybody does this, I began to understand how to communicate with different people to make sure that we are in agreement on our end-to-end strategy. So, just to tie it off, what Michael said is absolutely important. Just map it out and make sure that you're communicating with each of your stakeholders in a way they understand before you, sort of hold your breath and jump off that cliff.
Right. So we'll discuss a bit more about the accountability setting within the different teams a little later, in detail. But for now, let's move on to the next question, which is about the challenges faced by the marketers while calculating ROI, because ROI calculating for a marketing campaign can be a little tricky and difficult depending on how you measure impact and cost. And again, I'm talking this in context with the early age startups. What do you think are the challenges faced by the marketers, like the most common challenges, and maybe the mistakes done by the marketers? Dina, can we start with you?
Sure. I think, what immediately comes to mind with this question, we work with a lot of business to business. That's primarily who we work with. But one of the interesting statistics that we found recently in a recent survey that came out was, only 24% of B2B marketers run campaigns for more than 6 months. That's disturbing. So this is kind of an era when B2B sales cycles are getting longer. They're often extending past 12 to 18 months. And if we're only running campaigns for less than 6 months, that's already a problem. And I do feel that there's so many departments and so many companies that make this mistake because they're so eager to show progress, but they have to actually let that sales cycle continue and actually play out. Otherwise, quite frankly, do the math and you're not going to see the ROI. So common mistake we see.
Absolutely agree with that. And Kenneth, so your take on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something from my own historical past too to add to that. I love what she just said, because in a lot of large scale TV campaigns that I was running before that were millions of dollars to spend, people would often, and I think we're getting worse and worse about looking at a short-term view of a sale. And when you look at the long tail of attribution, and she mentioned 6 months, people really have to look at how long it takes people to move through that funnel. And not enough is really thought about in that. You do that a lot with TV, but you don't do it in a lot of other forms of digital marketing. So when we would spend millions of dollars on these major car campaigns, people weren't watching an ad, for example, in feeling emotion from it and then running out the next day to go buy a car. You go through a much longer process. So those campaigns that were measured, whether it was an automobile or something, or many other products, were 30, 60, and 90-day attributions. If you think of it in higher ed has a much longer tail than that. So really understanding how to measure that through a longer funnel, even though we're looking for just short-term clicks and likes and click-throughs and view-throughs and everything else, I think some of the stuff that we can measure has to be just looked at through a different lens and understand the timing of what you're measuring as well.
Absolutely. So we at Designhill are also running a few pilots these days about with respect to a few new ventures that we have launched, and it's been 2 months. And I agree with everyone here when you say that that you need to wait. You can't jump to a conclusion right away, and when it's too preliminary to say anything. So again, so can I also understand as to what is an ideal time period for any campaign? So I'm sure it depends business to business, but maybe let's say 1.5 years, like Dina talked about the sales cycle, the entire sales cycle. So what is an ideal period, ideal length of an ideal sales cycle? Yeah, Dina.
An ideal sales cycle, or you mean an ideal campaign run time period? Okay. Yeah. And that's a great question. And I think every organization should ask themselves that question, but I don't think there's one answer. It's just definitely, there's not one answer that goes across the board, but I do think it's especially challenging with startups. Startups are fun and I love them, but what we find is there's a lot of impatience, and there's a lot of, we want to see when we flip these switches, what happens? And there's this mentality of, let's flip these marketing switches and see what happens and then act on it. And a lot of why I think that happens is entrepreneurs who are typically at the head of these startups, that's how their brains work. We move quickly, we get excited, we get passionate, we want to take action right away. And sometimes patience is the hardest thing. So I really believe perseverance, and that's our magic word when we start up with any new clients. There needs to be fortitude and perseverance to really see it through. And I love startups, but I do find that that's a trend. Patience is not common.
Great, great. I absolutely agree. And I really want our own team running pilots at Designhill to see this, to actually watch this. Coming back to Michael. Michael, you spoke about customer centricity a little while ago. So the next question is about a buyer's journey, right? So they say that it's all about the buyer's journey. So what do you think are the touch points in a buyer's journey that are more likely to convert into a healthy buying decision, which would in turn help businesses get better ROI?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question because it's, like most things, and as a consultant, I guess, we always say it depends, unfortunately. But I think the other thing that I think is really fun to think about is that every time I've guessed wrong. And so I think it's really important, like you were just talking about with timing. I kind of think of marketing campaigns as, sort of like my desire to be more healthy. It's the same as a business desire to get more revenue. There's no good time other than yesterday to get started. And there's you should never stop, right? It's not like, oh, I'm healthy now, I'm going to start eating, chocolate and drinking too much beer. Like I would love to do that, but then I wouldn't be healthy. And so the timing should be always on. And I learned that from Ginger at SAP when we worked together. And she's too humble to tell you that, but always on is the best way to do it. And then which touch points are most important to drive ROI? And the answer is kind of tricky. It's like one thing, like a single campaign, generally doesn't deliver a lot of return on investment. But when you've got an early stage, a middle stage, and a late stage touch, for those buyers, you'll see conversions go up. When you think the right early stage piece of content or campaign approach, you're going to be wrong. And so if you're always testing multiple approaches in the early stages, in the middle stages, in the late stages, even into retention, one of the really interesting things I found with content was that early stage content to existing customers drives new sales in adjacencies or relevant products. And so even what you might consider a late stage piece of content could be an early stage piece of content for someone else. So I think the point is to ask the question, customer centricity, ask the question, what are the things that your customers are looking for? What are the questions that buyers are asking? And how can we constantly be part of that conversation? How can we be telling stories? How can we be delivering insight? How can we be leading the conversation about the trends in our industry? Those are the kinds of approaches that I have seen work all the time. But you can't just pick one and say that's the right one to do. It's got to be kind of an approach, an always-on approach to being healthy, to getting revenue, and understanding that you're probably going to choose wrong if you try to pick one, and to constantly be testing.
Great insight and very relatable as well. Ginger, my next question is for you. Right when we're talking about customer centricity, let's also talk about the lifetime value. And this term actually was written as is in our registrants list of questions. Lifetime value refers, when a customer brings to a business over their entire life as a customer, not just one transaction or first transaction. So why do you think lifetime value is critical when calculating ROI for any business?
Well, I think that, first of all, great question. And I think that we've all seen the studies that tell us that it is more profitable to keep a customer than to gain a new customer. It doesn't mean that you should focus, inside all the time, but it does mean that you can't ignore your current customers, right? I think the old adage way back when I started in marketing was that a satisfied customer would tell 3 friends, and a dissatisfied customer would tell 11. So in the online world, I've seen a book recently on Amazon that the satisfied customer tells, how did it go? I'm trying to think. It's still the 3 friends, but the dissatisfied or the angry customer tells 3,000 friends, because now there's social media and you're online, and the multiplicative effect happens. And P.S., you know what? When you're happy, you got to tell somebody about it. That's just a very sad commentary on the human experience, I think. So when you're building your campaigns and you're building the integrated strategy, and what you're trying to get to, you're moving them to the stages, right? Awareness, your customers are already aware of you, right? So you want them to become aware of more of what you show, right? And then you want them to trial it, and you want them to engage, and you want them to convert and to buy. But then you also want the loyalty effect, where you want them to actually advocate for you, right?
Yeah.
And then you get the amplification from them. And that's why the return on investment from the lifetime value is quite critical, because of that that amplification you get from satisfied customers.
Right, right, absolutely amazing. So the next question is a very it's a very straightforward question, and also the most asked in the registrants list. And we're gonna start with Kenneth. Kenneth, so when we have a budget on our hand, it's easy to spend too little on marketing. It's also possible to spend too much or spend on the wrong kind of marketing. Can you please share a few tips or methods for defining your marketing budget? I mean, how should one go about it?
Really, I think we've got to figure out what has worked for you historically, at least, to also give you some context of where to spend it from an advertising standpoint. I can do things from a content standpoint that will produce great value over a lifetime, but maybe don't produce something short term over a short term, 30-day window, just for example, whereas content may take 6 months to 9 months to crawl, and then it get consumed in the right way. So I think at least understanding how to break down those channels, but really honestly looking at how all of these channels work together, whether it's an advertising channel, an email channel, social media channel, is really integral today. So much of what we've been measuring has been siloed, and that has caused great confusion, whether it's with content, whether it's with email. We've got great metrics on the individual channels, but the customer, regardless of who it is, the customer doesn't care. They're not sitting in a room thinking about how this one works versus another. They're consuming it's not 7 touch points, it's 700. And they're getting so much noise coming to you left and right. So taking the most important thing that I've been doing over the last couple of years is looking at the real-time attribution, if you will, across all the channels. Because if you look at what has historically worked for you in 2020, you could not have used 2019 data. You could have not used 2018 data to measure that. You could not have had any kind of crystal ball to predict what we went through last year up to now. And if you think about what happened even in the States, if you had run ad spend during the initial part of the Black Lives Matter movement, that would have not been historically seen in 2019 data. So in real time, you've got to start looking contextually at what are the triggers prompting those channels. For example, and one more is if you're running a TV campaign of any kind. If you run a TV campaign, you're going to silo that measurement on most of your channels, and then you're going to go look at your Google device, and Google's going to tell you that advertising converted better on Google because that was the last click. It's one of the problems we run into so much. However, what was the trigger? Was it that social media campaign posts you pull together, or was it the TV ad that prompted me to pick up my phone in the middle of doing some research? So really understanding all the pieces together and really analyzing that perspective of looking at it broader as opposed to only deeper will help give you a much different view. And that's not easy for everybody because you've got to have the right kind of technology, but it really, at least to start, takes the mindset of not thinking what just worked on Facebook, what just worked on Instagram, what just worked on email, what just worked on a content piece, but all the pieces together.
Right, that's one really, really great insight. Thank you so much, Kenneth. And we would also love to have Dina's take on that.
Yeah, in defining budget, you can imagine the variables are great. They're all over the place. So, and we do get this question every day. So you're right. It is probably one of the most commonly asked questions, and rightly so. People need to know, how to set their budget, how to plan accordingly. It makes sense. So this is a daily conversation we have. And a lot depends on, looking at your strategy and looking at your plan. do you already have proven success in that area, or is it brand new? That's going to affect things greatly. And then also, and this came up earlier, we are big fans of doing pilots. And really, because when people are asking about budget, they want to be careful and they want to be, secure with where every dollar is going. And it's very common for marketers and marketing leaders to want to run, whole hog, for some of these campaigns, some of these new technologies. There's the shiny thing syndrome, which is rampant in the marketing world. So we're big fans of doing pilots and learning from them. And really looking at, okay, what is our baseline? What did we learn? What are we going to do differently? So I really actually believe in very conservative budgets to start out if it's a brand new endeavor. And then if you're really stumped on where to begin with budgets, start talking to people that that own agencies that run, or people who actually run departments within larger organizations or organizations of similar size to you. Just start to get some ranges and start to get numbers on paper, and don't be afraid to ask that question.
Absolutely. So while Kenneth and Rina talked about, studying the historical data, what has happened in past and taking reference from them. Michael, would you like to throw some light again, for someone who is just starting out? I mean, how does a new person on the block goes about, spending the marketing budget, especially when they have very little on them?
Yeah, I mean, I always love to point out, people talk about paid, owned, and earned media, which is, do you pay to advertise your brand somewhere on someone else's, website or channel or TV program? Earned is, PR, get someone else to talk about you, and then owned. And what I always find really interesting and somewhat shocking to a lot of people is if you look at the average corporate website, 90% of the traffic and the leads that you can attribute on a company website come organically. About 5 to 7% is paid, and then the last 2 or 3% is earned or social media. I mean, I know companies that the first thing they do is hire a social media person. And I'm not, downplaying the importance of social media, but, it's 2 to 3% of the average company website. So the first thing you should do is probably hire someone to manage your company website and make sure that your content is up to date, and make sure that you're, constantly and frequently telling good stories and creating, effective and helpful content. Yeah. So I think, thinking about the context of that proportion, paid, owned, and earned, I doubt most companies spend 90% of their budgets on owned media. Basically on your website, essentially creating helpful content. And so it's why we do what we do. It's why we try to convince our clients to focus there first. It's not to say that you can't get ROI from paid media, or that our PR is a bad investment, but I don't think they're the first things you should do. So get your house in order is basically my advice. Make sure your website is designed in a compelling customer experience kind of way. Make sure that you're delivering content that helps people, and then test the paths of conversion that that make the most sense for your customers.
Great. Ginger, before we break, we would also love to have your insights on this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, of course, but I think that I would not to end on a downer, but I would throw a word of caution out, and that is that we have seen over and over again that by the time someone hits your website, they're pretty far down the decision-making path, especially if they're going to self-identify. So your website better be compelling, to Michael's point, because these people have pretty much made up their minds by the time, or not completely, but they're pretty far down that path by the time they come to your site and self-identify. And so that's where you have to try to strike the balance. How do you get the people early in that decision-making process to visit your site? And that's where the other pieces will come in. So will come into play. So you really, I don't know how to state it more strongly. You've got to determine where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, the biggest return on your investment. Is it the people who actually have made it to your site because they've made the decision, or what's the opportunity cost? What about the people who didn't come to your site? And figure out how you can maximize them.
Great. So we also have a lot of questions in the questions tab. We will take them up. post this break. Guys, please keep these questions coming in. We'll try to answer them all in the latter half. With that, I hope you guys are enjoying the session. But before we move forward, I would like to give a quick shout out to Designhill for organizing this event. Please stay tuned, and we will be right back to hear more from our panelists.
Clarematics is a full-service video agency based around video production. We created a brand that fit our identity at the time, but as we've evolved as a company, we found that that original brand didn't quite fit our aspirations anymore. Finding a partner to rebrand your entire company takes a lot of time and effort. Finding Designhill was an incredible lifeline. Designhill offers a money-back guarantee. If we don't like any of the designs, we get all of our money back. The stuff that we ended up with were well beyond what we had been seeing on other creative services platforms. After creating a simple design brief by answering some questions created by Designhill, we posted, and within a few days, we had over 250 entries. Designhill's platform made it easy to communicate with all the potential designers. Eventually, we picked a winner. In addition to a logo, our designer also created a letterhead, business cards, and banners for all of our social media platforms. With Designhill's help, we now have a brand that meets our aspirations. We're ready for the future and everything that it's here to bring.
All right, let's take a few questions from the questions tab. Rani Kaplan is asking, what is the right frequency in campaigns, as it is too easy to unsubscribe or ignore the communication, especially in B2B people? In B2B, people are getting inundated with info and offers. Kenneth, you would want to answer that?
Sure. I would say create. Well, one, you can't answer that. Sorry, and something just popped up. You can't really answer that without understanding the true context. There's not a magic number. One, something Michael said that I love hearing from anybody always is always be testing. But I'm not a big fan of putting out too much content. I have to warn myself off from doing that as well. Instead of writing a short blog 5 times a week, look at writing an amazing blog once a week or once a month or whatever the frequency is on whatever kind of content you're creating. But it's really, there's a difference in advertising frequency and understanding those caps. But from a marketing standpoint with creating content, you really got to look at what works for you, because there's not a spot on answer that fits only for B2B, only for B2C or D2C. You've really got to figure out what works with your audience on whatever your channel is that you're engaging with them on. I don't think I could give you a fair number that would make sense, because I've seen so much across the board that doesn't make any sense of logic. It's what works with your audience as a whole.
Right. So would anyone of the panelists would want to answer, add to that what Kenneth said?
Yeah, just to echo what Kenneth said, I think the other thing to be aware of is I completely agree. I believe it's better to err on the side of less frequent today. Didn't used to be that way, but today less frequent is better as long as the quality is high, just like Kenneth said. And I do believe that if you don't do that, and you just go for numbers and you just go for a schedule, you really do start to erode the trust of the person on the other end. And they're going to start the eye rolls as soon as they see your name come in the inbox. So you want it to be the opposite. You want it to be, you know what, every time I open one of these, it's relevant, or every time I open one of these, it locks eyes with me. So it's bigger than the unsubscribe rate, right? A lot of people don't unsubscribe, yet don't trust you when your emails come in. So I just have to echo that 100%. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be mission critical for your audience. Otherwise, don't send. It almost takes more diligence and more discipline not to send and to go tighten things up and make them stronger.
All right. So, Rani, I hope that answers your question. And we will take one more question by Mike. He says, but is always guessing, or really marketers now or have all the metrics and insights to project the ROI of a campaign? I'm sorry, I really couldn't make any sense. Did any of the speakers understood the question?
No, I read that one. I wasn't quite sure what it meant.
Gotta rephrase that. Please do that. So I'll jump back to my list of questions. So the entire world has gone online in past few months, even the businesses that were more meant to be done outside the digital world. So how has measuring marketing ROI changed during and after the pandemic? Ginger, can we start with you?
Oh, well, I think the most obvious answer is that a lot of people were experimenting with online events, and we're experiencing different amounts of fatigue with online events. So measuring your ROI, first of all, your tactic mix probably changed really quickly, and probably didn't have as much time to be as thoughtful as you would have wanted to, right? Because you had to pivot really fast. I think the other thing about measuring your ROI that changed during the pandemic is, especially for me, because I work in vertical industries, is understanding where your customers are. So there are some customers who were in industries we marketed to vastly differently from other industries, hospitality industry, travel industry. Suddenly what we were doing for something that usually had a very, very, very long runway, like aerospace and defense, we were looking at those strategies to say, how can we apply those to new industries? Because this, I banned the word unprecedented because it just became so overused, but you get what I mean. We had never seen this before, so we all had to tread very carefully. So, and we all adjusted the numbers that we were reporting to the street, et cetera, and that cascaded throughout the company. So measuring your ROI in 2020, first of all, went very digital. Yeah. I don't see that changing right away, but I also caution us not to forget measuring our ROI, pre-2020. And I think going forward, it's going to be a nice hybrid of the two measurement strategies. One of the things we're struggling with is how to humanize the brand in a virtual situation, right? Because you can't actually shake somebody's hand and sit down over a cup of coffee. And then also, how to create a relationship. So especially for the industries that have the longer sales cycles, if you're struggling with how to create that sort of virtual relationship, I would advise that we bone up on those skills, because it's going to impact your ROI. So I'm not sure that I gave you concrete advice so much as philosophical advice on how to start looking at your ROI, but it's sort of the life I've been living for the past 10 or 11 months.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Michael, I want to extend this question to you. And Ginger actually told us as to how it has changed over a period of time in last 9 to 11 months. How do you think businesses should adjust with this new normal? What changes do you think they need to adapt to, and how should they go about it?
Yeah, I'm kind of old school when it comes to my perspective on this question, and and I'll just give a quick stat. So Internet Live Stats counts the number of searches every single day on search engines, and they show that we saw average global daily searches went from 3.5 billion to nearly 6.5 billion. So significant increase. In some industries it was 2 to 3 times more people searching for keywords related to the solution or category of product that they sell. And so my question to businesses is very simple. Do you show up for search? It sounds like a 1995 question. And in some ways, we've gotten away from it. If there's any SEO experts on the line, they know that the days of gaming the algorithm or black hat linking are over. It's just really a matter of, do you provide a good answer to a customer question on your website? Are you attracting people that don't know who you are? So I love going into SEMrush, and I'm a big fan of that tool. I know someone asked a tool question. So I'm in that tool multiple times a day. Every time I get a call from a prospect, I go on SEMrush and I see how much traffic did they get from organic search? What do they show up first for? And every single company gets 75, 80, 90% of their traffic from their brand name. Guess what? You're talking to people who already know you. So what if you answered the questions for people that don't know who you are and introduce them to your brand? What if an executive from your company was providing the answer? Talk about humanizing your brand. get your executives and experts to answer simple questions that are asked by customers. So it's kind of an old school view, I guess, to the world we live in post-pandemic. We're never going to go back, I think, to the number of people working in offices. I don't think we're ever going to go back to, some people are going to go back, but I think the numbers aren't going to be as much as people think it is. I think we're going to see massive changes in the commercial real estate market, for example. But I think the approach is still the same. Do you show up for search on anything other than your brand name?
Great, thank you, Michael. And that also answers Maria's question. She wanted to know if we have any tool in mind for identifying the ROI. All right, so moving ahead, let's talk a bit about the social media ROI. Now, this is I don't know if this is a myth, but it can also be a debate. It is often said that measuring social media ROI is difficult because it does not generate concrete leads. And marketers can also often believe, even if you have high number of engagement metrics like likes, comments, retweets, reshares, it is really difficult to put this together and convert into actionable items. Is there any truth to this? We would really like to bust the myth if there is one. Dina, you want to start with?
Yeah, social media content, again, with what we do with B2B marketing, and the majority of our clients do have the long sales cycle like we talked about earlier. So the way that we really view the social media part of campaigns is, the entry into a larger string of content. So, if we have something like a case study or something like an explainer video or what have you, that's longer, that's a bit deeper, that's really designed for those who are, as Ginger said, kind of deeper into the funnel, those social media posts can start to attach them to that content and start to tease that content. So we really look at that as really content, advertising content that's deeper and actually getting them there. So, the way that we look at social, it's not the end all, it's such a small piece of a bigger picture, and be very careful of putting all your eggs in the social basket. There's people aren't going to convert from social, not in a complex sale, I should say. I should definitely qualify that. If it's a simpler sales cycle, if it's buying tires, if it's buying makeup or something, perhaps, buying shoes, then it could be like that. But for a longer, more complex sales cycle, social's just the beginning. And quite frankly, we build all the content downstream of the social posts before we ever post the social posts. So it's very good to think of it all as a connected piece.
All right, but does that also mean that when attributing marketing spend to different channels, social actually should be last in the list?
Good question. And I would actually ask Kenneth what he thinks about this one. I don't believe it should be last on the list, but I think there are too many organizations that are enamored with social. And like Michael said, they hire a social media manager because they think it's sort of the end all and it's sort of the new buzz, there's always a new platform that's out. It's the new shiny thing syndrome. Marketers are absolutely the most guilty of doing that. I don't think it should be coming last, but I don't believe we should put as much emphasis on it. I'd like to hear actually what everyone else has to say on this one.
Kenneth.
So I don't discount social at all. Although I don't spend all day on social, I don't discount it as part of the overall process. It is, to credit what Dina just said, it is part of a longer puzzle. Social is playing a lot more of a sales process than it used to. Even in B2B, it really obviously depends on whether or not we're talking B2B or B2C or D2C, because that's a whole different, if it's D2C, it's a whole different wax. You can put a content piece or a social ad for some sort of D2C product and make millions without blinking. But understanding how to really measure, and this is where we run into a problem, especially from an advertising standpoint, those are walled gardens. Google doesn't love to communicate with everything Facebook's doing or Instagram. They're not in the business of sharing each other's data. Google just tells a better story with organic and where it last click converted from, how somebody went to search. But the problem that I'm seeing, especially with social in content today, and I know Rand Fishkin has talked about this before with search, is people are often still looking for a lot of those vanity metrics with a post and thinking it's going to convert to a sale. I can
Right.
tell you as a podcaster, I will post out something with somebody like Seth Godin or Michael Brenner, people, these big, names in the business. I'll get 2 clicks maybe on a social post today that a year ago I would have gotten 50.
Yep.
And when I mentioned Rand Fishkin, who I know I posted his, it's almost where he talks about non-click searches. Somebody sees it and then they go download it on Apple Podcasts. So it's not a great indicator anymore of a one-off. It's part of the overall process, and you've got to be able to really spend time with the right type of attribution tools or the technology like what we work on, where you're stitching this conversation together. Because I'm not spending all day on Instagram researching a product for SAP, for example, and then that's the only thing that makes me convert. I'm
Yeah.
seeing a blog post, a TV commercial, something mentioned on Clubhouse. There's so many different channels now. And to Michael's credit earlier, yeah, if you're not spending a lot of time optimizing your home base, that website to start, then it becomes a really big problem. But social is much more of a overall process. It fits into the pattern, the fabric, if you will, much more than it used to, but it's not necessarily a great indicator of from the vanity metrics what we're going to produce finally on the sale or the lead conversion or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's really an insight, and I'm listening it to so carefully because we do it on a daily basis, and I completely identify with what also Dina said, and that how we should not only depend on the vanity metrics, that if the engagement could be high, but if it is not converting, that it's really not working for us.
Well, let me add one more thing, because to what she also said, I was thinking about Clubhouse. At least there's no advertising on there now. But if you think of what TikTok was, I mean, TikTok has been my saving grace for entertainment between that and Netflix over the last 12 months. If I poured every dollar I had to advertise for a product, it would not be to pour it all into TikTok and then wait for the phone to ring. You've got to think through all of the social channels that people are on. They're not only on TikTok, they're also on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is. So you've got to think through a lot of that process and then hopefully be able to stitch together, where all these touch points were. And so much of it has been looking at vanity metrics on social media versus last click metrics from search. And those are not things that are working there, because your customer is in so many different channels today.
Yeah.
But TikTok's still a good thing.
All right. So let's move to a different direction. And this was a question in the registrants list, and I have straight away copied pasted it in my list. So how to tackle and factor in extraneous variables while calculating marketing ROI, like sudden changes in economic trends or a website slowdown for a few days in a month or industry changes. I mean, and these things keep happening. So how does one tackle it, and how does one factor in all these things into while eventually calculating the ROI, let's say for a particular period of time? Ginger, you want to start?
Yeah, oh, that's so funny, because I was just talking earlier today with Kenneth about this, and honestly, I could babble, but if you want a good answer, Kenneth, I'm going to put you on the spot and kick it over to you, because he's actually got a better answer than I did.
So from an attribution, from a pure analytics standpoint, you've got to look at real-time triggers, the real-time in the time setting you have. And I worked for a brand before that was a seasonal business that was very heavily dictated by weather conditions, for example. So the way the weather would work on a weekend would help us figure out what was going to drive sales immediately after. Well, you can't look at a rain shower this weekend versus last weekend. Perfect example. That has nothing to do with pandemic or social, civil, people being up, social injustice and things like that. That we're literally just talking about weather data. Weather data would would give you some idea, but who knows what it's going to, the weatherman doesn't know what it's going to do tomorrow. So understanding how to live in the moment as opposed to relying heavily on modeled attribution data that a lot of companies use, which drives me crazy because everybody's models have been broken. They've been broken for the last year. And you've got to look more contextually, because when you also throw in the pandemic and social movements that are drawing a lot of attention, these are things that didn't happen a year ago, and they're really dictating the conversation of where we are today. And Ginger, I hope that's what I said earlier. So I hope that gave you some context.
Pretty much spot on. I just didn't want to parrot back your thoughts because, then I would have, been a fraud.
All right, Michael, we would want to hear from you as well about this.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been sort of bothered about marketing is that it's where we started this conversation really is on retention. I call retention the sort of lost child of marketing objectives. We all know it's more effective, cost effective, but nobody, like so few marketers, so few large companies have a retention plan or strategy. As a small business owner, I know that 80% of my new leads every year are coming from referrals. And so my main marketing strategy is to generate referrals and to maintain retention, customer satisfaction with the clients that I have. And obviously I do net new acquisition as well, but I try to focus that percentage. So I think really, I think especially the smaller the business, the more important retention and referrals is, but it doesn't mean that the insight doesn't apply to large companies as well, which I think is really interesting. So as far as extraneous factors go, I remember Gary Vee, and I love Gary Vaynerchuk for many reasons, but I remember him saying a few years ago that every brand should be on Snapchat. And I had somebody ask me a question at an event, what's the ROI of Snapchat? You're talking about what's the ROI of social. And I told them the answer is shut up. because
Amen.
We have to stop chasing shiny objects. Like, yes, we should be on platforms and having conversations and testing new things. But the bottom line is the majority of most new business for all companies is coming from existing customers, either staying or referring new customers to you. So, as far as leaving extraneous factors out, let's make sure we focus on our current customers. Let's ask them if they would refer us or recommend us to other people, and then test new strategies for new customer acquisition.
Right. While you were answering this, Michael, I'm going to remember this conversation that we just had by just one line, which is retention is the lost child of marketing. And I just copied pasted in our marketing group as well just now. So amazing. Okay. So I have one last question on my list, and then we will take up the questions from the questions tab. We have a lot more now. So let's talk a bit about the competitors' marketing. Studying competitors' marketing efficiency and why is it important? So, and what is a good way to start studying your competitors' marketing efficiency, especially if they are good at it without going berserk? Dina, can we start with you?
Yeah, I've got a quick answer to this one. And it may not be a popular answer, I admit. We do not obsess about competitors. So it's not that we don't look at them. It's not that we don't do an analysis of them. It's not that we don't respect them as competitors. But I will tell you, if you start measuring yourself based on watching your competitors, you're going to take your eye off of the right ball and you will fail. So I'm very passionate about this topic, and not necessarily in the popular way. I feel like when I get asked that question, when clients ask that question, we can talk about it. I usually want to ask why it comes up. If there's something they admire about their competitor or that they want to aspire to, great. Let's talk about it, but let's talk about it in the bigger vision. Let's talk about it in the, okay, how can we incorporate that vision into your strategy versus chasing your competitor? I believe that when you start chasing your competitor, you're in huge trouble. I could go on and on. I'll stop.
So true.
I'm sure. So, but is it always about chasing them? I mean, I'm sure there could be some learnings that we can have from their journey.
Absolutely.
Right. So Ginger, I'm sure you have a lot to add to this. Yes.
So what I would add to what Dina just said, and it's basically just underscoring what she just said, is that you have an outside in view of what your competitors are doing, not the inside out. So what you're doing is looking at their highlights reel and you're not seeing what wound up on the editing room floor, and that would tell you a very different story. And you're not them. If you want to be them, go join them. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not a fan of worrying about what the competitors are doing. And one thing that I loved, our former CEO, Bill McDermott, and Jen Morgan, and now Christian Klein, they always tell us on our internal calls, we are not permitted to talk about our competitors negatively or positively. We're not, and if it comes out of our mouth, it better be positive, right? Because we only like to beat a good competitor. We don't want to beat the bad guys. That there's no glory in that. So that's the only time competitors come up in our internal conversations. Otherwise, we're focused on what our objectives are.
All right, so it's 2-0, and I'm very excited to hear it from Michael and Kenneth as well. So do you agree with what Ginger and Dina have to say?
Yeah, I completely agree. As a former salesperson, I remember hearing my boss tell me complacency is our biggest competition.
Yes.
And the other thing that I always
Like
and I
that.
always like to think about it too. Like, your competition isn't who you think it is. Like, I compete with Content Marketing Institute and HubSpot. And Content Marketing Institute is a publisher, and HubSpot is a CRM marketing automation company. They don't sell what I sell, but they create content that competes with me for customer attention. So your competition isn't always who you think it is, and it's probably most likely somebody doing nothing.
I'm loving your one-liners, Michael, and
yeah,
really,
I know.
yeah.
This is really frustrating. I got to follow the guy with the best one-liners of the day. So thanks a lot, Michael.
Too much coffee.
Stitch to something together. Yeah. Well, let me say this, and maybe this will compete with Michael's. If you're looking at anybody else other than yourself and perfecting your customer experience, I mean, I used to tell people, don't look at anybody else other than a mirror. I mean, not enough companies are doing that, because to what Dina was saying earlier, everybody immediately starts comparing every metric they have. That's the wrong kind of metric. Now, if you could figure out a way to secretly figure out what their lifetime value is, and figure out what that competitor's doing from an experience standpoint, fantastic. Those are fantastic metrics to get. If you can get them, you're probably not going to be able to. If you could steal the Excel file somewhere.
Corporate.
Then I question your integrity, but whatever.
Yeah, then it's integrity. But I mean, if you focus on yourself and really those customers and stay customer centric, a lot of your marketing and advertising problems are fixed when you kill it for your customers. And not enough people focus on that, and they only get focused on lead acquisition, which I can do that with my eyes closed. But what I'd rather do is help you take that and apply it towards a longer term customer with a longer lifetime value. Whether you're a startup or a big company, look, for startups who want to sell their company in a 5-10 year plan, you get some devoted customers that you're killing it for them with an experience. That's gonna show up in your growth overall, and it helps replicate, and it fixes a lot of your social media problems, all kinds of things. Really focused on helping serve them, the customers that are there in front of you, not what you think might be on the other side of the grass. And I still don't have a good one-liner. So look in the mirror. That's my one-liner.
Yeah.
Amazing. With that, my list of questions have ended, and let's go to the questions tab and try to answer most of them. All right, Maria has one more question. What is your take on podcast as a marketing medium? I'm not sure. We're talking about marketing spend and their attribution here. Any of the panelists would want to quickly answer that for Maria? Podcast as a marketing medium?
So I think it probably makes sense for me to answer that. One, because I have a podcast, and also because all three of our other panelists have been on my show. I do find podcasting as an amazing medium. It's also, and I'll bring this up in context to what we were just talking about earlier. I look at podcasting. Well, I take that back. Ginger, you do. I have a different format than what Ginger's done at SAP, but with podcasting in particular, so many people want to compare themselves. They go listen and they try to duplicate what other people are doing. I don't know of any other podcast that spends what I do on talking about in a conversation. Then I ask people what their favorite kind of shark is and whether or
Shark
not they like Batman or Superman. So, and I'm not going to overly do that. I'm trying to infotain, if you will, but I'm not really worried about trying to figure out that as a medium to figure out what I'm going to sound like for against other people. I know Ginger and I presented on this a lot. We're not competing. If you're an accounting shop, you're not trying to compete with Bob's accounting shop that also has an accounting podcast. You're competing with the Joe Rogan Experience. So really thinking at least through that, how do you really infotain, if you will, your customer base, whatever kind of topic it's on. And so everybody should go listen to A Shark's Perspective, because you'll find each of these brilliant people on there. But it's a great medium for where you can take from a content standpoint too. I mean, I can do a video interview, for example, with any one of them or all of them, do it as a panel. I can break that video down as tactically just as an audio piece. I can take the transcription from an SEO standpoint. I can blog about it. I can share it on social. They can share it on social. It's a fantastic medium. I think you really got to, at least from where you want to do it as a marketing standpoint, figure out though, are you wanting to deal with the commitment of producing your own show? Because most shows don't last more than 7 to 10. That's the normal number. It could be that your expertise is valued. For example, I've brought all of them on. I don't know that it makes sense for Ginger, Dina, and Michael to have their own show. When Michael, you've probably been on 1,000 shows. I mean, he's a highlighted expert on podcast, but he doesn't have his name attached to a podcast that he created. So, it's a give and take on what you're trying to educate your consumer base with, as to figure out whether or not it's the right kind of medium for you. There's not a right or wrong answer though. You do have to test it. But if you do it, just make sure you make the commitment to your audience as whether or not you're going to fulfill it long term. And from that, I know, Dina, you raised your hand, and Ginger, you got a podcast through SAP as well. So
thank you so much, Kenneth. And I hope that answers your question, Maria. Moving on to the next question by Paul. He says, we are a startup bringing a revolutionary fiber powder to the consumer market. Our budget is limited. So what platform would you suggest is the best to begin with? Facebook, Instagram, email, etc. Dina, you want to answer that?
Yeah, my first question is the fiber powder industrial? Is it being marketed to another company, or is it, to the consumer market? Sorry, he actually said that, to the consumer market. Wow. Okay. So
is this like Metamucil?
It could be, right?
Like
I'm thinking fiber, yeah, it could be. Budget is limited to the platform. Would you suggest? Golly. I have so many questions. I would not just run to an answer on this one. I'll be honest. I would say, because it's consumer, and if you want to talk social platforms, certainly Facebook's the largest. But, to Kenneth's point, if this is like a fiber, like a Metamucil type thing, you could have a lot of fun on TikTok with that. And that's one of the fastest growing, platforms for consumers at the moment. Same with Instagram. But I guess I would answer this question with a lot of other questions, which is, okay, who are you going after? What's the age group you're going after? Do you have a list? Do you want to, generate leads first? I've got so many questions.
Yeah, I'm dying to ask him. This is probably some like industrial metal powder? We're not even.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but to her point, I would say you've got to look at your audience, because if it is something like Metamucil, that's more of a Facebook crowd than TikTok.
Yeah.
Although you could have more fun on TikTok with it.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Then my 2 cents would be, go where your audience is, and then where they're going to talk about it. So whether it's on, don't just go to a channel that you're going to tweet about it all day long, but people don't talk about it in the social world.
Okay, he said it's the 40 plus age group. No, it's like Metamucil, Benefiber, et cetera. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the last question for this session will be by Dalila. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Is there any advice on how best to market a media broadcast, the news, on social media, especially since the world had gone digital and information comes to people from all angles and it's harder, I'm assuming, to measure ROI? Michael?
Dean is raising her hand. I'm going to
I am. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was raising my hand. I actually come from a news background, so this actually I've got big opinions on this one. Coming from a news background, that's where I started my career, and my husband still works in news, and we've been in the news industry for decades at this point in this family. So I really feel like right now that news organizations have to be very, very careful how they differentiate themselves. So Delilah is correct in saying that there's everyone out there can actually produce news, right? And produce content. And you've got these individuals who are posting everywhere on social and so forth. News organizations have so many reasons that they can stand out. They have better technology. They have better equipment. You know, when TV came out, movie theaters didn't all of a sudden decide to shrink down their screens and, you know, change their format. They just did what they do best. They did higher quality sound. They did surround sound. They made it more of an immersive experience. Same thing with TV news or with any news organization. I think it's important right now for those formal news organizations to look at how are they better? How is their quality better? How is their investigative reporting better? You know, that's a lost art these days. You know, there just isn't necessarily that depth of reporting any longer. So I think it's important to do some serious soul searching. If you're a news organization, do some soul searching and don't only look at what's changed, but also how you can rise above that change and be stronger.
Wow, that's amazing. Michael and Ginger, would you want to add to that?
I really don't. I think I really wouldn't add too much. The only point I think I would add is I think news organizations often underestimate the fan experience that people have with personalities on air. Mm-hmm. And so make sure, you know, the folks that are on the air, the talent behind the camera, that they have social profiles, that they're sharing out, you know, small pieces of the videos that, you know, maybe behind the scenes or what their family life is like or where they live or what, you know, whatever, but just to humanize themselves a little bit. I think the news organizations, the media companies that are doing that are taking advantage of our desire to want to feel like we know people that we watch on the news.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
Okay, so you basically just, exactly what I was going to say was to humanize. It's going to be paramount. So however that manifests for you, if you don't want to invite them into your family life, that's fine. You do still need to come across as something other than a talking head. And I'm using that figuratively, right? Because it could be written, it could be audio, it could be video, but you need to come across as an authentic individual.
Amazing. Guys, we are already 15 minutes ahead of the session, and that's kind of a testimony that, you know, how well this session went. I enjoyed it myself a lot. But we have actually reached at the end, and this was indeed a value-packed session. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. Once again, I would like to thank our panelists for taking out the time to be a part of this event. Before I wrap up, any last thing that speakers want to say to the audience? Michael.
I'm just typing thank you into the chat. Thanks everybody for joining. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. Dina?
I'll be very quick. One thing that I did want to bring up in a couple other questions is, you know, looking back at this pandemic and looking at all of these external forces that have happened, those have affected your customer as well. And I think everyone has been so focused on, well, how do we change our KPIs and how do we look at our ROI differently? The way that you do that is actually, you know, reverse engineer it and look very carefully at what have they as humans been through, and that can actually change your KPIs and your ROIs. Thanks, everybody. This was fun.
Amazing. Kenneth?
So I'm going to try to borrow a little bit of a one-liner that, and looks like we lost Michael, but John Wanamaker once said, half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. Problem is I don't know which half. So it doesn't necessarily think it applies to all things in business, but if you're at a point now where you're not able to measure well, take a really strong look at that. And I don't just mean from a clickable perspective. If you're sometimes your metrics are too narrow, it's almost like looking for that, dopamine rush that you get with how many clicks or likes or shares. And that's the wrong kind of metric to really focus on. The more that you focus on your customers as well, you'll be able to stitch together a much better conversation as to where your marketing and or your advertising is really leading to growth.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Ginger?
I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm so excited that you all showed up to hear us. Thank you for your time. I don't underestimate what it means to take time out of your busy schedule. So thank you for that. We all appreciate that. I know I can speak for my co-panelists here. So please connect with us. Find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Do us a favor though. Tell us that this is where you saw us, right? Because I get a lot of connect requests and I don't know who the people are. And it really does help if you say, saw your panel at Designhill, like to connect.
Yeah, and if you're gonna screen capture, make sure that we're smiling and I don't have like a good look. But I want to thank the folks at Designhill. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. You've been a great host.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm not sure why Michael dropped out. Maybe some problem with the connection or something. All right, guys, this is not where it ends. We have a lot more events lined up for you in the coming days. So if you guys are interested and haven't registered yet, I'm putting the link of our event section in the chat where you can find all of our upcoming events. And please feel free to register and attend the event. It's free to join and register. To stay updated with events like these, you can follow us on our LinkedIn page. You can also give us suggestions on the topics you would like us to cover and speakers you want us to host. We are dropping the link of our LinkedIn page also in the chat. To watch this session and other such wonderful events, subscribe to our event section and or visit our official YouTube channel. The link will be there in the chat section again. For all the designers and artists who are listening to this and wish to be a part of this thriving community, please visit designhill.com. Lastly, you can follow all our speakers on Twitter and LinkedIn to learn more about business and marketing. We have shared their handles in the chat box time and again during the session. And if you want to build your brand, use this coupon code COMS15 to avail 15% discount on Designhill contest service, like we promised at the start of the event. Here is your coupon code, and you will also get it in your email boxes. On that note, I would like to say bye to everyone who joined us here today. Thank you so much, Ginger, Kenneth, Dina, and also Michael, even though he's not here, for joining us today. Take care, guys, and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.